Really excited and honored today to be with my friend Bob Beaudine. Bob has an amazing story. He really has helped so many people with his inspiration, his stories, his enthusiasm, his care. And as a business guy, he's one of the nation's top in what he does. So let me just tell you a little bit about Bob. He is the president and CEO of Eastman Beaudine. He is one of the nation's most respected search executives, having conducted hundreds of searches for Fortune 500 companies, entertainment entities, professional sports organizations, nonprofits, Olympic bodies, and universities, among many others. Celebrating over 50 years in business, Eastman and Beaudine have been named by the Wall Street Journal as the top recruiting firm in college sports. Sports Illustrated named Bob the top front office matchmaker in sports, as well as the most influential man in sports you've never heard of. These accolades come as a result of Bob helping shape the leadership teams of NBA, MLB, NFL, NHL, franchises, and league offices, in addition to universities, athletic departments, and conferences across the nation. Bob, his experience extends through the PGA Tour, the tennis tour, the U.S. Olympics, NASCAR, UFC, and so many sports-related nonprofits, among others. He is the best-selling author of The Power of Who in 2 Chairs, and I'm looking forward to talking about that. And just real quickly, I got both books in front of me, and I just got to mention some of the people that have endorsed these books. The Power of Who, Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, Wayne Gretzky, iconic Wayne Gretzky. How'd you get that one, Bob? That's incredible. Max Lucado, one of the best-selling Christian authors of all time. Troy Aikman, me being a Dallas guy, that means so much. One of the great Hall of Famers. Todd Duncan. And then I look at 2 Chairs, a book I've bought hundreds of copies of to give away. And I was introduced to 2 Chairs from our mutual friend, Tom Ziegler, and Tom has endorsed it. Tubby Smith, NCAA champion coach. Dave Ramsey. I mean, it's incredible the endorsements Bob has, and again, the influence he's had. He is a frequent speaker at universities, corporations, conventions, conferences, and workshops. He's appeared on the Today Show, Fox Business Network, CNBC, and many other major media networks. His leadership extends into the community, being involved in multiple philanthropic efforts. And one of the things he's the most proud of is him and his wife, Cheryl, have been married over 3 decades and have 3 grown daughters and 4 grandchildren. And wow, Bob, it's an honor to have you with us today.
So great being with you, Kyle. I've been looking forward to this, doing something with you on a podcast for a long time. You're a superstar to me.
I was going through photos a couple of days ago, and 5 years to the day, I was invited by Howard Partridge to swing by one of his conferences he was doing with Tom. And he said, I want you to meet Bob Beaudine. And little did I know that day the seed would be planted to us having a podcast today together. And we've had lunch a few times and connected before. But, your story's amazing. And the fact that with all your success, you just continue to keep showing up and wanting to love on people, impact people, encourage people. So I'm excited about our conversation today. I do like to get started, though, on the early years, just to give people context. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, anything you want to share about those early days, and then, some schooling you got involved in and what led you to what you're doing today.
I was born in Mishawaka, Indiana, which is right there where, South Bend and Notre Dame. My dad was a Notre Dame guy. And so it was early in my process, lots of snow, moved to California and had a chance to, kind of grow up in Fullerton, California, learn skateboarding, kind of gave during the day, and then moved to Chicago. My dad was a McKinsey guy, so he traveled a bunch and did a lot of things early, probably for my older brothers and my sister. I'm one of 4, and so we kind of moved a lot of spots. Actually plays a factor in how you get along and how quickly you can adapt to a new city, to new friends, to new, situations and everything. And then, my mom had met my dad during the war. My dad was a guy who was fantastic, second lieutenant in the Navy for a destroyer back in Pearl Harbor. And my mom was from the South. And then when all the kids went to school, my mom made sure that she wanted me to go to a Southern school. And when I went to SMU, I fell in love with it and decided to kind of stay here in Texas. And so early years been kind of fun for us. The Beaudines are an aggressive, be at the table, fight for who can have a conversation. So it's always been enjoyable.
So both your mom and dad were that way, or was it more your dad?
My dad was for sure that way. My mom always laughed because she'd always tell me to eat slow. And that was to be the last thing anybody at our table was doing. She, you work at all the meal, everything, and everyone's just like, "Bleh." And then who could talk the most? My dad had created this game called Penny, Nickel, Dime, which was always fun, that wherever we went, my dad would have a pocket full of penny, nickels, and dimes. Okay. And then we would ask questions, and you had a choice of 5 questions, and families should do this everywhere, because we were just enthralled at a restaurant or wherever we do, is that you could do it on sports, on TV, on movies, on current events, and on family history. And so you find out no one knows anything about their family history, right?
Right.
And so, like, what did your grandfather do, and what's your grandmother's maiden name, and you go back through history about what they loved and what they didn't, and then you do things. And if you got a dime or went crazy, and he had some 4 or 5 quarters, and you asked for a quarter, you're in deep trouble on the question, especially for a McKinsey guy. But
so you would ask for the coin you want. And
yes,
so
I'd say I'd like a dime question.
Okay, got it.
And so later in life, with my kids, we got away from penny, nickel, dime. So we would go to Mexican restaurants, and then we would have the chip game. You can't eat a chip unless you answer the question right.
Okay.
And so everybody is waiting, all their friends, and we just hold court. And what everybody found, and all these people would come over to our tables and say, "Oh my gosh, your kids are the most behaved anybody." Yeah, I know. We were all competitive, and we wanted to answer the question. And it was so impressive to see if other people could listen and just wait their turn, right? Which my dad was teaching on so many different levels. And so today, most importantly in life, right, listening equals love. Especially during this time of a pandemic. So when you stop and are patient to hear somebody all the way through what the heart of the question is, and when I train people on sometimes interviews, they're so quickly ready to kind of get in with their point that they didn't let them finish their question. And the main reason they're on that committee was to ask that question. They're more nervous. Yeah.
I love that. And we'll get into it in a little bit, where you coach your clients. Oftentimes, head football coaches for colleges and the pros, and, commissioners for all the different leagues. You talk about going in and actually listening versus presenting and trying to find out what they really want, which is, I think, a paradigm shift. And so when people are out job hunting, I know we're kind of jumping tracks here, but it's so valuable. It's such a phenomenal way to change how people should look at the question. But talk a little bit about that, because I think a great example is Scott Drew. Baylor had their, I guess, death penalty or close to it in 2001, and you brought Scott to them. And
I mean, they had a murder on the team, and so how do you come back from that? Yeah. And they had during a time like that, everybody loses their jobs. And so I didn't have an athletic director, and I was doing it. And so to one facet of a candidate, we don't present applicants for jobs. We go out and find the 3 or 4 best in the country who have alignment with the values of the institution, wherever it is, corporate or all of a sudden a professional team or a university. And so you had to I always first try to get to know the president of whatever the organization is, to kind of hear what it is, their messaging and goals and vision for someone, and where they would go. And so when I first met with the president at Baylor, it was very important to him that it was a person who was faith driven. because it's Baylor. It's it's one of the top schools in the country in a Power 5, but at the same time, they're a Baptist school that looks for somebody who has a strong relationship with Jesus and loves all that. So he said, can you find me someone who can look me in the eye and say that Jesus is Lord and at the same time win me the Big 12 championship, which I thought was funny. And of course I said, yes. And he said, well, where were you when I was looking for my football coach? Yeah, you didn't ask me.
And so, later on he did, right?
Of course. He then came back, and I did several of them for him over the years, and for her now, for Linda. And so it's been candidates really today, when people they're everything's back, kind of upside down, because it's not about being interesting. It's about being interested. And so that's a paradigm shift for people, because they're always coming in trying to figure out what's the one thing they could do and say that's going to win them something. So they're always trying to sell something like they're the best. And of course, that's very hard with people who don't know who you are. And so we always teach, really right off the bat. It's a really good thing to teach. I teach a hierarchy of thought. And so there's 4 things that people think about when you walk in the room. And if I told you the 4 things, it'd be like me teaching you, giving you the test answers before the test. And so the first thing people think when you walk in the room is, do I know you? And so the question is, who do you know in this committee? Who do you know in the people to whom you're going to meet, the individual you're going to meet? And who do you know who knows that person so well, who's going to interview you, that all of a sudden you have an edge that someone they can trust before? Because references, endorsements, and testimonials are your greatest allies in life, right? And so if you know someone and you've done homework, of course, you should know something about them, because we have the internet. And so you should be able to go on, and I should be able to watch everything that Kyle has ever said, who all your clients are, what you've done, which is historic for you, because you have all these unbelievable people that you had, and where you've taken them in their careers, where no one knew at the time what to do with a career and how to do it, except for just go make a talk. This is like epic. And so what I teach people is that, hey, let's do a little study. And so if you know something and know that person, someone close, you have an 87% chance of getting the job or the deal.
Wow.
Now, I don't know about you, but 87 and 13. I'm going for 80. I'm going for 87. And then in the first conversation, I can't tell you how many times I've had a candidate, and I always tell the candidates, like for an athletic director search, that I'd like you to walk in and introduce yourself. Don't rush here and get past the who event and go straight to the what. No, we got to go in and talk to people and have a moment with each person. And if you go in and you handshake and you know something a little about them and you talk and see where you relate, because athletic directors are very good at that stuff. And then if you can build a moment, and I could talk about someone they know also, and create this little triangle. So like if I introduced you to all of a sudden Scott Drew, and you're coming in and you're talking to him, and you both are having fun saying Bob's a crazy person, and he's all this, got this energy, and he's like that, and Scott will have so much fun with you. We've moved this to 94% already. Wow. And we haven't talked about anything. 94 versus 6.
And,
now,
and
you and I both
want,
know that.
Well, I want to ask you something on that. So number one, you're saying connect the dots. What do we have in common? Who do we know? Huge. Yeah. Number two, let's say you are walking into a meeting. They're looking at their watch. It's a type A guy. He doesn't know what you're talking about as far as that skill set of connecting. He's not in that mindset. Do you adapt and just go with the style if he doesn't want to have that chit chat for whatever reason?
Well, I mean, beforehand, I've really figured out that I had you call on my behalf to him beforehand. Yeah. So so again, you want to go in a job. Those are other issues. Is I got 5 things that we should talk about what you're looking for. I'm not looking for a job. I'm looking for a dream. So the answer is, if he's one of these people who does this and is not interested, he's in for the, for the deal, and he's in for all of a sudden for some transaction, and you're going to be in cubicle number 6. And when you're 46, you're going to be in cubicle number 9. The answer is, I don't want that job, because you should go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated.
Great answer. And so those are clues, right? And so you got to say, is this the environment I'm going to want to be in? Okay. So thanks for letting me jump in on point 2.
And so if we're at 87 and 94, we understand already that if talent was the reason everyone won jobs, we wouldn't have Congress and Senate. And so, I mean, it's just
True.
the answer is, but the people aren't doing it just here, because the next thing they're going to do is the client is going to walk you in and say, let me talk about some needs I specifically have. And now that's when this starts to get golden, when they make the decision to move you into talking about what this is about. It's the same like at a home visit. If your son was or daughter was a great, athlete, and you're in the home visit, you're not getting into the talk. You're talking about everything about the high school football coach, the track coach, the field hockey coach, whatever it is that you're a top swimming, diver for, and she's so fantastic, soccer, is that we're going to talk about a bunch of other stuff. And then the mom or the grandma or somebody's going to walk you in and say, hey, so tell me, let's talk about some needs here. And when that happens, things get better. And then the question is, are you the best for me? Okay, so now think about this. Do I know you, like you, understand needs? Are you the best? Here's the way the world works. They flip it. They've made a huge error. And I see it every day. So do you. So does everyone who listens to this. We will immediately recognize it and go, uh-oh. They come in and they say, I'm the best. And they sell right off the bat, I'm the best. Didn't you see me on like LinkedIn? No, I didn't see you. And so people come in and I'll have coaches, they'll send me their videos, they'll send me their stuff. And they think like hey, they're somebody. The answer is, who wants to hire that person right off the bat? It's sending off such a bad scent in an interview, and it doesn't do it. Number two is they come in and say, hey, I understand your needs. My question is, does a woman let her husband understand her, another man come in and understand her needs if she didn't know them? The answer is no. I mean, so no one wants you to tell me you understand needs. And that's why it's so important in a process to get a relationship with someone the right way. And then they finish with that as, well, you're going to like me, and at some point you'll get to know me. and of course, that doesn't work.
And again, your background was in professional, the search industry, right? Connecting for companies. And then you got into the sports area. And a double question here. First of all, how did you make that transition? And number two, have you found that sports does have more of that, hey, we need to build the relationship? Is it a little bit more figured that out, especially with free agency and things like that, where, who can create the most rapport at times? Yeah,
great question. Great questions, because the first portion of this is that when I first got into, I was really starting to already think about the power of who, and writing this book. I'd gotten involved initially, and I was practicing some things with my dad. My dad and I worked together for 20 years. My dad started the executive search industry back in 1967 out of McKinsey. And so we had office Chicago, New York, LA, San Francisco, 15 countries in Europe. And we were blowing and going. And I looked at him one day, and I was in the Dallas office. He was in Chicago. And I looked at him and I said, one day, I should do what I love and what I'm really good at. And he goes, okay, so like, where are you going with that? And I said, if I did a search for a president of a manufacturing company, and I was doing that now for 10 years, just normal business CEOs, et cetera. And I said, if I did a search for a president of a manufacturing company, at the end of the search, I got a tour of the plant. But if I did the head of marketing for the NBA, we'd get All-Star Weekend. And he just laughed, and he said, so that's the dream. And so I said, yeah. And so what's really funny is one of the guys who was on our board, who was a chairman of Frank B. Hall, and he was a big insurance guy in Chicago, and he was politically well connected. He had moved the Milwaukee Braves to Atlanta, and he found Hank Aaron. I mean, the stories about Bill Bartholomew were just fantastic, and who just passed away in his 90s just before the pandemic here, and so a big loss. But when I was sitting one time, my dad kind of looked at him and said, hey, so Bob wants to do sports. And he said, really? And he goes, he says, no one's really doing that. no one had ever done a search in sports. No one had ever done it. It was always, if you were a coach, you would always just pick out somebody who was a big name, and they would tell you, and that former coach, Bobby Knight, would tell you, or Coach K would then pick his next person, or Dean Smith or John Wooden. And then if it was in the pros, you'd have Bill Belichick telling you, right, here's who I want, and here's who, and they just kind of keep passing around this hat. And you for sure see it in baseball, where managers keep trading around no matter where they were. Instead of someone doing a search, which is what they do now, is my job is to come in and show you the 4 or 5 best who have a demonstrated record of achievement and alignment. And then somebody who I get to know you, who's one of the owners. And then I really start to come in with somebody who's got the specific skills, given the current trouble that you have, because no one gives me a search if there's not trouble. And so it gives us a chance to then find someone who can really leapfrog you because of some skill sets and their ability to build a culture that's so much better. And so my opening search, Bill had me leave the room. I come back in, and then Bill says to me, my dad looks at me and goes, "Hey, well, Bill has a search for you to start in sports." And this is where I started to really figure out, okay, this power who, in some facet, a little bit of where my 2 Chairs book was, because I was really thinking about a whole different type of thing that I'd like to do. And that was the opening search that he turned and he said, "Hey, I'm the number 3 guy and run finance for all of baseball. You just didn't know that. And we're going to do a search for the commissioner of baseball." And I did that search back where I put in Bud Selig, and then had a chance to interview the 50 biggest people in sports and business and entertainment, which really, really elevated my ability to jumpstart meeting everyone, right? People who were chairmen of American Express, Colin Powell, interviewing President Bush back in the day when he was, just kind of, a managing partner for the Texas Rangers. So it was kind of fun. My whole thing is, initially, when I just to tell people, is sometimes I thought in business was to work for owners because they own 7 or 8 other businesses. And I thought that if I did that search for them, for their president of their baseball or football team, their business, I would then get the other searches. So it'd be better one-stop shop. And that worked really good for me in this process, and has my career, because I do 30% business CEO still, and then 30% of mine in college and pro. And most of mine are startup people who have come from technology or something else where I've done a lot. And they need someone who's going to be doing personalized service, right? That's what's fun.
I love the conversation with your dad. And first of all, your dad, was all for it. He encouraged it. He listened, to your point. And I want to ask you, do you feel like that was a bit of a whisper, God whisper, or tap on the shoulder? Like, where did that aha come from? It's like, this thing, and again, for your dad to identify, so that's your dream. Was that kind of one of those pivotal moments for you, Bob?
Oh yeah, 100%. First off, I was young to get an opportunity to do something that your dad could really do, and would be great for him to, in his career, to do the biggest job in sports. And the fee was ridiculous, and no one had ever done a search for a commissioner of a sport. And the fact that my dad was doing something to invest in others and not think about himself is something that I live with, right? To look at opportunities that I can stop today and not take a highlight. When I do a search in sports, I never go to a news conference afterwards. I try to stay just the point behind the scenes where my clients and my coaches, they're the stars. And my job was to put them in the right spot, to make sure I dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, and to do something where I could elevate others. I think was a pivotal part of me kind of growing up.
Love that. And, I think of, like, in the music world, of a Mutt Lange, who's the behind the scenes producer. And I'm talking to Phil Collin of Def Leppard. He's like, Mutt's had the greatest influence in my career. And, the more I get to learn about your world, Bob, there's so many people you have massively influenced, because like you mentioned, some of these teams have challenges. Well, some of your candidates too, who really do have the chops, but maybe they got into a tricky situation, and because you trust them, you believe in them, that they're talented, you get that opportunity to to consult with them and help them. So you're really on both sides. And I always talk about this because I feel like as a seminar promoter, as a podcast host, all these different things, you're actually trying to bring value to both sides. If you can build a big enough audience, then you can attract amazing talent. The talent benefits from the audience benefits from the talent, and you're the facilitator. And you get to facilitate that among, and again, let's be honest, people in power with a lot of money, sometimes they're the greatest, sometimes they're not the greatest, and sometimes there's all kinds of bureaucracy that comes with these things. Commissioners, I can't imagine the complexities of different agendas and opinions. So that's a whole skill set. But then to really see talent, I think that's another one of your secret sauces. You really see talent in people, and you love seeing talent in people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's, people say today, the hardest job is to place someone when they're young in their first job, when they give them their big opportunity. And then they watch them as their career goes, and all of a sudden they're this. I mean, I had the current AD, athletic director at Texas, I placed in his first job. The AD at Texas A&M, I placed in one of his jobs earlier. But I can go back through history of all these people that you meet. One of the things a great story and a great lesson is my dad early in my life, because my dad, after California, had lost his job. He had done some things positive for a group, found out things weren't going the way they should have been going. They let him go because they didn't want anybody to know what they were doing. And so he was out of work for 6 months. And every single day, my dad never told the kids in our family, but he got dressed up in the morning, take us to school, get us up, and he'd be dressed, he'd go out, and then he'd come back in and start his job search. And so when I worked for him for 20 years, my dad used to always tell me how vulnerable people feel when they're out of a job. That their identity was the card for a while. And they didn't know who they were, whose they were, the path they're called. They're kind of lost in the shuffle. And my dad said, if somebody comes to the office and they're leaving their resume off, because that's the traditional way of ridiculous aspects of networking, that why I wrote The Power of Who, to blow that up. They would leave off a resume and not know anybody. And so my dad would say, you would come out and you would meet that person, put your arm around them, take them back in, have a cup of coffee. And he says, and you'd spend time with him. He said, there's something great in everyone, Bob, and it's your job to find it. And so I get so many people today who have been, for some reason or another, they shot themselves in the foot, or something happened politically that was something they couldn't do anything about. But both of them, no matter what, feel terrible about who they were. It's like, I don't care if you're later in your life. I mean, I love the Jewish dictionary that there's no word in the Jewish dictionary for retirement. and there's no aspect that people really want to not do something important as they're going throughout their career, early, late. And so what happens is they'll come to my office and they're like distraught, and they're like power selling. They're thinking this is about the power of Bob when they come in to talk. And so they're doing something. And I usually, when I start to talk about the trouble, I turn to them and they go, I just don't know what to do about this trouble, da, da, da. I go, well, first, congratulations. This is the greatest day of your life. And they totally give me this perplexed look. And I go, listen, you didn't love that job. I mean, you got divorced in that job. You had trouble. What if you could today, what if I challenge you today that you could find a job, something that was not a job, but a dream, and you could do something you love with people you love in a place you love, where your family loves it, and you get to do it for all the right reasons. I mean, most people, they love the job, they hate the people, love the people, hate the job, love the people, love the job, hate the city. I mean, it's just, but they're caught because they're caught in this matrix that says this is the way the world works. And I'm telling people, we have to get out of the box and into our who. And when you get with who, it's not about how and what, it's about who, because you are drawn specifically like a homing signal to do something that you were created to do that's better than anyone in the world. You do one thing better than anyone. Everyone who's listening and who has not told you that you do something better than anyone, I'm telling you, they lied to you, because you do. And our job is to get you through books. I mean, readers are leaders. To get you through podcasts, to get you through conferences, to get you through audibles, whatever it is, to hear the one nugget, the one thing that reminds you, and you go, beep, that's who I am. I got to go get that.
Love that. Wow. So one of the things that popped up in my head, and I don't want to take us backwards because that was so powerful. When you have someone come in and they're dripping of, being a little bit of the blame game, it was this person's fault. It was the owner. It was this, it was, again, do you confront that, or do you just take them to more the solution of, two things, right? To look at it differently, or do you have to confront that a little bit? And secondly, can they sometimes stay in the same environment and change it?
Yeah. So I immediately confront it in a way that's so lovable. I try to make it, first off, my goal is that I'm doing this out of benevolence because I'm hired exclusively by clients. I don't work for candidates. I'm hired by my client to go out and do this. And so when people do this, I can't tell you how many people who are friends of mine who say, hey, can you spend time with Kyle? And the answer is, yeah, send Kyle over. And they go, well, or my son. And, my son's had trouble. He's had 2 DUIs. What do I do? And I said, yeah, well, send him over. And he goes, well, when? Right now. And they go, are you serious? I go, yeah, no. I said, no. So there's no trouble that's had something when someone's hit the bottom that we can't turn around, that we can't all of a sudden, but we have to get you a different viewpoint from where you are in the muck. We got to get you out of this muck stuff that you're caught in the problem and you can't see from a higher ground. And so what's so important is I first got to remind you just a totally the other. And so that's what's so fun about the facet of the 2 different books that I have, because they're so complementary. The Power Who, I've given you this whole marketing plan of people who want to actually help you, that you have this community of friends who you built through years of love and unconditional giving that will come to your aid if you'd ask them. Of course, no one likes to ask any of their friends because, I don't mind helping you, but I don't like to have that. And so some facet of that's pride, some facet of that's the South, and that we were taught it was rude and to ask people for it. And we've been taught the old Frank Sinatra, my way, I can do it. The only problem is that Frank Sinatra didn't write My Way, Paul Anka did. There's an orchestra leader, there was a sound studio, there's all these other people. I mean, Blue Eyes was a great singer. He came in and he just sang, but without his piano player, I mean, my gosh, without Tony Bennett's piano player, there's some people who can make people magic. I mean, I consider that in your business. You make other people magic just by the way you do a podcast. And so it's just harder to get in this nice flow and feel. And so one of the things that I really believe you have to do with people who are in trouble is you're not spending time condemning some portion. We're talking about yesterday's irrelevant. I don't care what happened yesterday. I mean, when I do a search and I'm talking about Scott Drew, we're talking the very first day that I was with him, we talked about winning a national championship.
And this is what year?
It was 2003.
Amazing.
So I'm out in front of my house back in the day, and then with my F Troop telephone, I'm like one of those guys in the old war that they had to pull up the thing because you're walking outside your house, and they just didn't have cell phones. And so I would have to, most time, if I called someone on a search, they would say, let me call you back. And so, because they didn't want to do it. Now what they do is they go, Bob Beaudine's on the phone. They're going to leverage me. That all of a sudden is going to get them more raise in where they are. It's just funny. But my point is, we talked about it the very first day. And you could tell. It's just a little quick story. You could tell with Scott Drew. So I'm at the 5th game. He's taken the job. I mean, he blew the people away. I mean, that's a whole nother story. But
so again, as you had mentioned, Dave Bliss had been fired, and it was more than just that one scandal. There was viola scandals. There was all kinds of stuff. It was players that were threatened, and so it was
all
pretty
the
bad.
team. All the team had left. He had nobody. He was going out and trying to bring in people from overseas that he knew because of his faith that were tall people. When he had a guy who was coming in who was 7'1" that he brought in, but unfortunately he had malaria. And now he was 180 pounds. I mean, he had trouble. And so, but on his 5th game, this is the way great people think. They think differently, which is I want everyone on the podcast to think differently. And of course, anybody who could ever meet Scott Drew, I'm just encourage you to meet him because he's just awesome. And so, but fifth game, he's losing to Texas with 2 minutes to go by 46 points. Okay. And I'm right behind the bench. This is my first game to really watch him and support him and go down to Waco from Dallas. And I'm there. And so it's not a big crowd, right?
Right.
But if anybody's there, it's all the Texas people who want to see their team squash Baylor. and so, but there are some people there. And so they're down by 46. Scott calls a timeout, brings the team over, and he goes, okay, new game. So we have 2 minutes to go. If we win the next 2 minutes, we're having no practice tomorrow. We're going to have a party. It's going to be unbelievable. We're going to celebrate, but I need something different in the next 2 minutes than you've ever seen. We're playing probably against their number 3 and number 2 people. But he says, I want you to go all out. You dive for everything. They break the teams out there. They're like, and all of a sudden it's electrified on the court. The other team doesn't even know what the heck's happened. You're down by 46 and they're going back and forth scoring and et cetera. And the last shot, Baylor goes up and swishes the shot to win. They're in the middle of the court and they are jumping and leaping and everything. The Texas team is in line just to shake hands like, well, dang it, you lost by what, 44? and so everything shifted in one day. How? I had to create in someone something which I try to do when we sit and talk the first time. How do I get you to think for 1 second that you're a winner? That didn't actually occur and we don't care about that. You were created to do great things. In life, God promises that you're going to have trouble, but his next line is really fascinating. Be of good cheer. How could you be of good cheer in times of trouble unless I explain it to you that you must know something, you must have some inside information. That's right, you do. That there's a plan, that you were created to do something great. And the fact is that no one ever starts out and starts on the team when they first start. No one ever meets except for acquaintance and you and I say hello. We all start at the bottom. And then Michael Jordan was cut like 6 times and all this stuff, never made anything. And then all of a sudden on his freshman team is like he's cut in high school. Seriously, are you talking about Michael Jordan? No one sees that, hey, it's going to take some practice and some sweat. And then the trouble is an opportunity in disguise. And that's what I love to remind people is this, how many big victories do you have like Monster? I don't know. But what we've missed along the way was the people who matter most. And so we miss the balance with our families and our kids. And so one of the blessings that I get a chance to do in Power of Who in 2 chairs, I wrote one through the Power of Who through the lens of my dad, and I wrote 2 chairs, 1 chair for you, 1 for God, and sit and talk. I wrote that through the lens of my mom. And so I get a chance to bless my mom and dad's wisdom to them. I think that's the reason I had a great mom and dad, and is that I could share stories to other people who didn't necessarily have that, but could gain the wisdom that of reading and listening to the people. My gosh, of Brian Tracy and everyone that you've got. The list, you have like the highest Jim Rohn. Why don't I just stop and let him I wouldn't even want to talk if I'm on a podcast with him.
Bob, there's so many directions we could go. I gotta stay on the Scott Drew just for a minute. Then I want to jump into the Power of Who in 2 chairs because I'm a sports fan. I'm not a fanatic. I don't live and die, but Baylor got my attention because I watched them beat Arkansas. And after seeing them beat Arkansas, I'm like, they're unbeatable. In my mind, I didn't even know why there was a debate. But, the difference with Scott's team is these were guys that had stayed in school for 4 years. It was just a culture thing that was unbelievable. It took 18 years, but they had the death penalty. And so it just speaks such volume. And he really kind of stood out like this Dabo Sweeney type guy who loves his players and he's enthusiastic and he just brought so much to the game. And so I'm so that when we had lunch not long ago and you told me the Scott Drew story, it's like, wow, okay, that brings it to life. Like that connected the dots for me of here's a guy that's unknown, going to the worst possible situation, literally, and saying, I'm going to win a national championship. And to know that you had some input into that, into his belief system, and that that's something you're consistently wanting to encourage the people in your world to think beyond that. And when we talk about the book, The Power of Who, and then Two Chairs, I think part of the interconnectedness of it is the power of who is part of the God whispers that God puts in our heart and mind. I was talking to Brian Buffini a week ago, and he brought you up out of the blue. You brought him up out of the blue last month. And again, that was a whisper for him. Bob Beaudine's part of my power of who. Where's that come from? It comes from the same place that when you're doing your Two Chairs exercise, right? There's this interconnectedness between the two books.
When you meet someone, okay, each person carries with them this personal environment, and it's invisibly transmitted to each person. And there are some people that you were supposed to be with from the foundation of the world, and you know it. And I mean, it's like we're different planets. Some's a red planet, some's a purple. Some people like your laugh, your jokes, and your etc. I mean, the first time I met both of you, with you and Brian, in seconds, we knew that there was something we're going to do together. And it's not yet even close to getting done yet of where that goes and what could be involved and how that plays and how we interact. Because once someone takes a place in your heart, they never leave. And so there's something about your core values and this. And so great people who are in your who, of course, the people who matter most. And when I first started writing this, I made this question. I put a couple of thoughts in people's minds. What if each of us were given specific people in our lives to help us in ways we never imagined? And what if those people weren't just happenstance acquaintances? What if they were actually strategic, to help you do something that was so unimaginable? What if finding now, like in a pandemic, getting your mom in a hospital, getting your sister a new job, isn't about who you don't know, but whom you've neglected, your friends. And see, we've known it from the beginning, is that one friend. This is what Scott Drew always understood. This is what everybody understands. Brian understands, you understand, CEOs of this. When I would work with, with George Bush, President Bush, and do something, or if I'm, doing something with Ray Davis of the Rangers, is that one person makes a difference. If you and I agree on something, there's huge power. That's why there's so much power between a husband and a wife, and what a mates could do in each other. But if we got one more, like on a basketball team of 5, if we got a third, that's why Scott, they didn't have a death penalty, but it looked like it because somebody actually died. But their thing, if he could get 3, that cord can't be easily broken. Now, that's not a thought that just started. That's been a thought around for 2,000 years. And so what the key in life is that you can't be successful at things you like. You got to love it. And what Scott Drew and great CEOs do, and people I love to do search work with, and the people I love doing podcasts with, are people who love people. And so love is an interesting word because we have 180 words in the Greek language for love. And yet we in the United States, we have one. So I love my wife, Cheryl, of 38 years. I love tacos. Of course, that's a struggle for people. And so we've forced ourselves recently, and worse now in this pandemic, is we force people into not saying the L word anymore and being much more into for the deal, much more in the transaction. And of course, that hinders it. So I couldn't say to somebody who's a friend, who's another of the other sex, to say, I love you. But that's not the same as my love for my wife and my daughters, my 3 girls and my granddaughter, but it sure is a lot better than like.
So true. And when you're talking about Scott and, the people that have passion for what they do, it just in the chord of 3, it's not my quote. I'm sure it's been said before, but I just immediately, it's like culture trumps talent. And so you have so much historical perspective because your dad started the original search company. You've been doing this most of your adult life. And so I'm sure you've had some of the best clients who go on to sell or retire and then maybe they turn into some of the worst clients, and then but things are cyclical, right? Then it doesn't mean you throw that relationship away. It could always come back. But you've probably got to witness more than the average person the importance of culture, that companies just can't come in and buy, a team or whatever and just throw money away. And they might win one championship, but it's probably not gonna have that. Ultimately it's always culture and it's relationships, which is about the power of who that you talk about.
Scott Drew, and on one side, and I'll tell a CEO on another, is that Scott Drew starts from the day one on joy and culture. Okay, constantly joy, love. The game itself of basketball or baseball or football it doesn't love you back. The person on your left and your right does. Yes. Your mom and your dad who got you to practices all the time that you did there. And so building the integrity and the character of somebody and the discipline of what it's going to take to be someone who's going to start on something is just immense. Corporations are really interesting. 18% of companies today have a program that promotes friendship. That totally fascinated me as I started to really study and go into companies to retrain companies on the value of friendship. Just the value. So if you had one friend in your company, because of course, if most time when you think about it, they're around the coffee bar, station, and they're sitting talking. And then of course, here comes the boss over and says, everyone come on, what are we doing? We have work to do. And they bust that up and they do it. But if you had one true friend in your company, you're 40% more productive. That means you're not sick. That means you're able to withstand ups and downs that are happening, because there's a lot of things that are happening now for companies that they've never seen before, which as I come in and juice someone in a talk right now. And so I just did, Yale just had me come in to give a talk to their coaches and their staff to kind of reignite them and reset the focus on what is leadership in times of uncertainty. What's the difference between uncertainty and really a big crisis, and how do we get people to respect each other and to listen to each other again? Because I've had no one. I've been in my apartment in my house all alone, and my wife's over doing this, or my husband's over here doing this, and so we're doing this. So what's very important is that if you had one friend, you're 40%. So I can take your company. Who's up 40%? Well, there's some industries, but there's a lot of industries that are not. And so that just puts a priority and a key on friendship. If you had 3 friends, Kyle, you have a 96% chance of having a satisfying life, not a job. And so our problem is that we live in the matrix and people don't do that. And so that forces us into a cycle where we're too busy and we're thinking about ourselves. And when the world starts to revolve around us, in comes Mike Tyson, who whacks us and knocks us to the ground. And of course, the great philosopher, Mike Tyson said that everyone has a plan until they're hit. And that's when you need a friend to pick you up. So your grandfather told you if you had one friend, you are blessed. If you had 3, rich. If you had 12, you change the world. And so these people come into your life. These are the people who matter most. And most people, what I challenge people is that, if you were looking for a job or you're looking for a dream, who would you call right now? I mean, do you get in an accident? Do you hand out a business card from somebody you just met at the Y? Or do you do it I just met him at a chamber conference? No, you got better call your who, because I need somebody to do this. When you're going to stop and refocus here is that how many are on your list? Do you even have a list? Has anyone really started to think about it? And so when I get people to stop and I take them through, I get them my whiteboard and they're sitting in my room. I said, let's go back. Who got you your first job? Well, my dad introduced me to someone, or, I had a friend at college and they gave me this. Really? And then how'd you get your next job? One of the guys I worked with got me that job. And then how'd you get the next? And what we start to see is who. And if they ever had one that's a break that they did on their own because they all of a sudden thought, hey, man, I can do this on my own, Frank Sinatra style, is immediately, bam, they hated that job and it didn't really work. And so my point is that we've been taught that friends and business are taboo in this world. So let me get this correct. We're supposed to work with people we don't know and don't trust. And so this concept of networking, which was not working, which is faceless websites, handing out business cards to strangers, sending out Dear Recruiter letters. I get 200,000 plus Dear Recruiter letters a year. And I've never placed anybody from one in my entire career in 41 years. So why would they send them? Because they've been taught in a crisis right now. People are looking and thinking, hey, first off, think about this. We have 69% of the country that believe that a bad day at the beach is better than a good day at work. We have 80% of the country who are not using their number one talent. So that means we're training people, okay, and we're spending billions of dollars training people in jobs they don't want to do and are going nowhere. And it's creating something that's going to be created, which is what happens. 60% of the country is getting divorced. Why? Because they come home from their job. They have a trailing conversation. They were as positive as they could possibly be at their job, and they can't stand it anymore. So they got to say it to their mate, and they start trailing conversation about how bad their life is. Well, dang, the other person's had a tough day with something what they were doing, and then we joined Saturday Night Live Whiner Family, and we start talking about it. And of course, people just in a pandemic have gotten it just became tough. And so what's the solution here? Hold it a second. Stop. We need a friend.
Yeah.
We need someone who can talk you through this problem and say, no, you ain't got no problems. And that's what's great. If all of a sudden I sit with someone and I go, no. So name to me the 3 jobs you'd like. What's the dream? They can't even think of it. I go, that's right. You need, and one of the things that I try to teach people is a wilderness journey. You need to get away for a day. And you need to stop and rethink what it is that you've always wanted to do. What has everyone always told you we're good at? Let's start to build a concept. And then all of a sudden, we start to get ahead. So wouldn't it be logical? That's the big lead in, which was for me in my life, which was, I don't know what it is. I don't know what I want to do. And then, I went to my mom and said, hey, so how do I find, what do I do for goals and dreams and finding a mate? What would I do to find my dream job? And she said, oh, Bob, those are really good questions. Of course, I don't have the answer. And so she goes, but I know who does. And so she said, hey, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And she says, these questions are simple, but they're disruptive. And so she goes, can I ask them to you? And I said, yes. And when I now do it with these people who are crazy people who are most successful in the world, I say, listen, I don't want to talk about the power who. I must talk about these 3 questions my mom asked. And I said, you can't get mad at me. You'd have to get mad at my mom. And so that kind of eases them, which then stops and says, hey, do you think God knows your situation? This is very disconcerting for a world today. And it's not to me religious, it's relational.
And this is the premise of your book, 2 Chairs, right?
Exactly. I mean,
the 3 questions that you ask.
3 questions and then 7 things to do in a time of crisis. And so the questions have to usually come up because we come to a realization, I don't know what age, that there's a limit to what Bob can do, what Kyle can do. I just can't control it. And I tell people all the time, what if you can control more of what you can't see than what you can? And if you understood that, you'd have a great day. If you did it every day, you'd have a great life. What is that? You don't get to control people. You don't get to control pandemics. You don't get to control the weather. You don't get to control all this other stuff around you. Here's what you get to control. You and your choice of going and sitting at 2 chairs. You could talk to someone, and it could be awkward for the first time, but I tell people, listen, does he know? Some people say yes, some people say no, And so when I say, hey, listen, the highest priority in a time of crisis is to get your mind above it, and the highest thought has to be God.
So you have 2 chairs facing each other, and the first question is,
does God know your situation?
Okay.
It's really funny. And so this is
and
really
so you have a specific situation. Typically you're
right. And he's in trouble. They just got divorced. All of a sudden, he just lost all his money. He just got fired yesterday. There's some situation where they lost a loss of your kid. I mean, the issues are things that you can't deal with. I mean, when, today, when people like sometimes, jump at me and I say, listen, when you're on a gurney heading to a hospital, you're not, looking for your rehab programs. You're screaming out, hey, God, please help me. And so that's fascinating, where all of a sudden people get to pretty quick when something happens to you and you can't breathe and you don't know what this is. And hey, I hope I have some medicine that someone's going to give me that's going to help me all of a sudden get that back. So one, does God know? And so listen, God doesn't have 6 telephone lines for like 7 billion people. This is like he could be in 7 billion houses at the same time. He makes house calls. He knows your telephone number.
And so you listen. And in my case, I keep a journal, so I'll write down whatever I hear.
Right.
And then the second question.
And so, is this too hard for him to handle? I mean, so this is really interesting, because a lot of people in times of trouble isolate and they say, I'm alone. And the answer is, you're not alone.
And it's impossible. This is not fixable, things like that.
No, I can't do something about this myself. I need something bigger than me. I need something that's supernatural. And so some people are not uncomfortable. And then I say, well, what are you going to do about it? So then we keep going. And the third question is, do you think God has a plan for you? And so let's go with the people. Most of the people say yes. I say, so what is it? And they say, I have no idea. And I go, exactly. 2 chairs. I did this with one of the top coaches, a buddy of mine, Greg Schiano. He's at Rutgers. And so he calls me, he goes, you wrote a second book? And I go, yeah. And he goes, I love that book. I just love your mom. If I tell people, most people, when they read the book, they call me and say, oh, I love your mom. And it's such an honor, right? To kind of, we get to talk about this. But, and so when we're doing it, and then he turned to me and goes, Bob, he says, Greg said, I've been doing 22 years of quiet time with God. I just never knew I was the one who was supposed to be quiet. And it's such a great line. I mean, and the answer is, because why? Because our normal time of talking to God is like talk, prayer, backing at him. So my statement is, what'd he say? I know. So the answer is, but every day we hear the enemy like speaking in our ear, constantly telling us all the negative stuff about us. My question is that we flip over here. And so what'd he say? He's got to, if we say we hear God, then all of a sudden we're like schizophrenic. We're like, we're a nut. We're not nuts. Listen to me. I'm an executive recruiter. I don't know why I wrote the book. The answer, God told me to write the book. I wrote the book. And so this book has gone crazy. I have people all over the world sending me pictures of their 2 chairs. And when you start, I say to people, hey, if you say, I don't know, I don't think any of the answers of my question is, I don't know if I really believe at this point because I've just been hurt or something happened in your life. I always say, thank you so much for being transparent. I said, so here's my question. If there's a 1% chance, that the guy who created the whole world would meet you tomorrow at your place, would you go? Everyone says yes. And I say, there we go. Okay, so set up your chairs. You own 2 chairs. Talk out loud. Don't go there to read a devotional, vicariously living through someone else having a good conversation with God. Don't go there to read like his autobiography. No, he's sitting across from you. He doesn't need you to do that. It's 5 minutes in the presence of God. It's going to change all your best life plans. So when I was writing this book, people always look at me and I just saying, listen, I'm very confident. And this thing, and God said to me, listen, do you think I'm going to meet with every single person? Yes. And he said, I just wanted you to say it out loud, because some people think, like, I have some friends of mine, occasionally they'll call me and say, hey, listen, I need you to talk to God about this. What are you talking about? I don't have like a line that he's going to talk to me, not talk to you. No, set up your chair. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's 2 rocks, it's 2 bean bags, it's 2 old lawn chairs. Find a spot. I mean, we're in tough times today. And people have settled into status quo. And the answer is, you were never created for status quo. You were created for greatness. You were created for epic things, for relationships, and for people to love you and cherish you. You were meant to have somebody who was a mate who hugged you and gave you the burst. I mean, and was your champion. And today somehow we've settled into a life of less, and now we're so uncertain. And the answer is, God wants to talk to you about that, and you can sit and complain. I always go into him and I say, oh, my shoulder hurts. I said, did you know about this? And he always laughs, and he goes, yeah, no, I know. I go, I'd like you to heal this. And he goes, I said, have you got a plan? He goes, sure, I do. You know, I do. And so the answer would be is, I've never, ever gone in time with my 2 chairs where he's not saying something to me. And then he finishes at this something. He goes, okay, are you done? I heard you. I got you. And then I go, okay, well, that's fantastic. He goes, I got something for you. I got something at 10 o'clock. Are you available? And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, listen, it'll be inconvenient. And so this is our opportunity for everyone listening to, you want your dreams to come true. Zig Ziglar, I mean, Tom Ziglar's dad lived in my neighborhood. I used to walk around with him, go to his Bible study. I mean, dang it. I mean, he would always say, if you want your dreams to come true, you got to make other people's dreams come true. If you want friends, you got to go be a friend. Whatever it is that you're desiring, start being that to other people. You can't outgive all this stuff. I mean, Tom Ziglar is one of my best friends. I mean, I just love him. I mean, when we go to breakfast, we leave planet Earth inside Glen Eagles Country Club. It's just crazy. And what we do is we try to outtell great dad stories. And then as soon as we get to a level, our stories start to come in. And then we stop and say, no, we're doing some things that God wants us to do. And I'm encouraging every single person is that I used to think people who wrote books tried to schmooze me into reading their books so they could become rich. And then I started reading all their books and I found out those guys are already rich. And they were trying to give me some point or two. And if I read a book and found a point that someone wrote, I mean, I can write down Brian Tracy quotes. I mean, he's the greatest goal guy I've ever heard in my entire life. And he's got, I don't know, he has 50 books. And then you're talking about every single Waitley and all these sides of guys you got. And Jim
what was cool was Brian and Dennis were hand delivered by me, your signed copies of Two Chairs. And by the way, other than books I've published, Jim Rohn, Dennis Waitley, and others, probably less than 5 books have I bought 100 or more to give away. And Two Chairs is one of them. And it really doesn't matter what your faith is. You can be agnostic, you can be Buddhist, Jewish, Catholic, Christian. All you're inviting people to do is to have a conversation with the creator of the world and just listen. And you never know what's going to show up. And my encouragement is just for people to set that time aside, 5 minutes. Now, often for me, it might be 30 minutes. I have the luxury to carve out a lot of time every day just for introspection and thought and journaling and things like that. And so sometimes Two Chairs can be so robust, but at the same time, if someone's new to this, just taking 5 minutes to even be still and quiet, and you never know what's going to come up. And I do want to, why we're just right here in the middle of this, just tell people how they can get the book. So to get The Power of Who, which is, you have so many massive fans with that book, and then you write Two Chairs, even though they intersect, they're also very different for either book or both books. What's the best way, Bob?
So they're all like, it's been blessed. I mean, Power Who is it because of I wrote it in 08, 09 during the time of the downturn. And now during the pandemic, people have discovered it and it's bigger than it was then. So it's still at Barnes and Noble and it's all at bookstores and for sure Amazon and et cetera, and easy for people to go to. Two Chairs, it's just exploded. Both of these now, I mean, who would have ever thought I could write a memo? But they're like global bestsellers. And so they've kind of gone to other levels, to other places. I had someone the other day, they bought 265,000 copies of Two Chairs to go to prisons and military and first responders and social services. So letters I get are so heartwarming from prison about a relationship and conversations that are just so heartwarming and so encouraging. And my whole point is that, that's just the kind of a God we have. And so it's always affirming. It's always, he's not mad at you, not mad he made you, not mad he made a mistake. So on the other side is that, and then people occasionally will turn and say, hey boy, I need like 50 something books, et cetera. And so they can go to BobBeaudine.com and my assistant Natasha can usually try to do something where we can get some books for people. Sometimes people want books signed and they need it for personalized, et cetera, which is a joy sometimes to be able to do for people. I'm on social media all the time and I put a post every single day for encouragement and inspiration. And I've been doing that for, 13, 14, 15 years. And people always ask me, who's doing like your stuff? do you mean who's doing that? I am.
Yeah, you and me. Yeah, you and me both do that because it's authentic. But, Bob, again, just the thread in connecting the dots. You're in the people business. You are in the dot connecting business. And you had this whisper of, hey, why not connect this to your dream? So you moved into the sports world.
Right.
And then you as you learn lessons at what you're really great at, you write a book that impacts people. And then some of the same colleges, have you come in and speak, and then you write another book. And what's beautiful is organically, and again, you are a Power Who guy, so you got connections and you know how to make phone calls, but it's really been organic. Like I can look back and say, if we went back 20, 30 years, Bob, who would have thought you would be where you are now with all this? But it unfolded. It was an unfolding of you just doing what you're really, really great at. And people would always come to me, how can I be the next Jim Rohn? And I'm like, find out what you're really great at and make a great living doing it. And eventually people will pay you to come speak about it. And you're such a great example of being an entrepreneur, being a business guy that excels at what he does. And now he's taken that message to reach more people than just his clients.
Well, I appreciate that. One of the great things about both books is that the Power Who and Two Chairs help companies and organizations, because we're talking about times of usual aspect where people are hiring search because they have trouble and they need a culture change. And they need that one person who has that one juice. And normally in the search world, the people who sell the business don't do the business, but in mine, I do. Yeah. And so it's personal. Leadership is personal to me. And so what's great is that I go, I've never tried to get talks. I've never tried to really, I'm not in the book selling business. I just kind of let it organically go, as you said. And so what I find is that the more you give, so like someone asked me the other day, how do I do talks? How can I do that? I said, well, I gave 2,687 one-on-one before I ever did a talk.
Exactly.
And so that's where people don't really, if you knew what it took to get to where it is, you stopped and said, would you have still done it? Well, I mean, it's always about the journey. And to me, it's always been about when I first joined my dad's firm, he said, there's 3 things that you're going to do to be successful in this business. And I'm thinking, because he's a Mensa and he's McKinsey, I'm waiting to do the technical. And then he said, okay, write this down. So I did. Number 1, make friends. Okay. Wow. 2, help your friends in every way possible.
Wow.
Okay. 3, don't be surprised if you do a lot of business with your friends. And so there's a lot of people who think friends and business just doesn't go. And my whole point is, I do work for the biggest companies in the world. I mean, across the board, and corporate things, from chief financial officers to CEOs to board of directors, and they all need that one person, and they need someone who thinks like they think. And wants to have someone who can. So when you know that you're going to have to sell a vision of some trouble, you want someone who's energized and thinks like you think. And I am on the phone talking to those people. And one of the great things that you said, which is correct, is I got who. So over 41 years of doing this, normally it's like name that tune. I can name that tune pretty quick with the 2 or 3 or 4 people instead of 162 calls. Right.
And I love that you said, you did 2,000 plus one-on-one presentations. And so here's my takeaway on that. What you say when you now speak in front of an audience is the tip of the iceberg of what you know. And again, I think I've seen that with speakers, with authors. They might tell you everything they know, and it doesn't have a lot of depth. And, Jim Rohn's the guy that would say, make sure what you say is the tip of the iceberg of what you know. And that's the beauty of when I was saying what you've done has been organic. It's just been the next step of progression. And the thing I want to be really, again, just to balance the scales, it is the power of who, but it's also the power of bringing value and showing up and being great at what you do. I think some people, Jim would say, some people you have to speed up and some people you have to slow down. And there are some people that are really quick to jump on the phone and try and network, but they don't bring value, right? So there has to be that equation of how much value can I bring, and focus on people you can help. You can't help everyone. No. And if you can't bring value, the power of who's not going to be as potent as it will be with the people you can actually really help. Would that be true?
So you're not, 100%. And so one of the great things that I can test something with someone is I say, listen, so you were given specific people. And so you're going to have to show me first you took care of them.
Yeah.
So if you want more who, you got to take care of the who you were given. And then you get more. And you don't actually, when I interview people, I love to watch how they introduce their kids to me. But how much pride and joy and how they lavish them with positive adjectives about this being, listen how great Angela is. Or, when I talk about Allison, Jenny, and Rachel, I mean, it's as big. I mean, I love it, but now I get to talk about Maverick and Major and Emma and now Bo. And the answer is that it's just more of what I could do. And so I believe that as friends, you have to start practicing. I don't believe in sarcasm. I never play in any of it. I don't believe in constructive criticism. So, I mean, that just says that you're going to give me 7 positives and then I'm waiting for the hammer. And so the issue would be is what is it that we could do that could so elevate the career of the people around us? And how can I be there? What joy would it be if I could be there in your worst time? That would be my greatest. My whole goal in life is to take the worst job, the Scott Drew Baylor job. I want to take, and I can show you hundreds and hundreds of those, or I get you at your worst moment that all of a sudden you don't know and you're thinking dark thoughts of suicide. And so now friends intercept you. See, friends are totally different than acquaintances. Friends help you now. Acquaintances wish you well. A friend, knows the song in your heart and can sing it back to you when you've forgotten the words. I mean, friends are secret keepers. Friends are chisels. Friends are unbelievable. And when we start to understand the power of who and the strength of a power of who board of directors, a personal board of directors, and we start to implement some of the stuff, we haven't even, like you said, we haven't brushed a subject here on what it is that actually we're really talking about here, because it's a total contrarian way to live your life. And we have to step out of the box and into our who. And when we do, it's not, my whole goal at Two Chairs is to totally give Bob Beaudine up so that I can totally see everybody else. And so the moment I do that, it's less of me, more of them. And then I have a shot at being successful in my day.
Wow. There's a lot of questions we don't have time to go into, but I think what people just need to do is go get those 2 books, and The Power of Who and Two Chairs. If they're needing any executive search help, Bob's the guy. Yeah. If you're in the athletic world as well and you have influence and you're looking for the guy, and I mean, Bob told, 1% of his, less than 1% of his stories, because when we've had lunch, you've talked about Roger Goodell. I mean, kind of the whole thing, tennis, how that got turned around positively. So just go seek this guy out. Go to bobbeaudine.com. Follow him on the social medias. I follow Bob on Facebook and on Instagram. And I don't know if you have YouTube coming or if you're involved.
I'm in YouTube and I'm on LinkedIn. Probably the only thing at the moment, I used to be on Twitter. It just kind of got sideways there a little bit for people to kind of do some things. But at the moment, one of my whole goal is, like you said, is just is what can we do to inspire and encourage? And we need that today.
Well, here's what I want to do, Bob. I'm going to put you on the spot, but I think I can get away with this since I've ordered a lot of books, from you. So I'll put you on the spot here and say, sure. If we have, if some people will send an email and put in the subject, Bob Beaudine interview, and I'll do a drawing and we'll pick 2 or 3 people to send some signed books to.
Love that. All in.
And listen, if they also have someone they really want to give a book to, like it's like, hey, I want a book for myself, but I'd really love to get one for my mother, brother, son, daughter, put that in there too. And, we'll do a drawing and I'll get Bob to sign those. And that would be amazing.
Yeah. Oh no, we'll definitely do that. We'll try to get it. So we'll give a drawing for at least 12.
Whoa. Okay.
So we're in for 12 Power
Okay.
Who and 12 2 chairs.
Love it.
Some people they're different levels that some people are in. Some people are more, hey, they definitely need something bigger than what they got. The other side is they need to figure out who their who are. They got a son who's just in trouble.
For international, I might have to do the digital version for international, but definitely for US, we'll do it. Bob, is there anything else you would like to share before we call it a day?
I just remind everybody today is that you should be celebrated, not tolerated. You should do something you love with people you love. And so to do that right now is that you've got to think a little bit bigger than where you were before. And so I need you to kind of stop the stinking thinking. I need you to start thinking thoughts that all of a sudden, in the thoughts that God has for you, the thoughts that I'm telling you that the world out here who are your who, the real who, they want you to do something fantastic. And so my favorite quote I want to finish with is by G.K. Chesterton. And he said a quote that says, the one thing in life that gives radiance above other things is there's something great just around the corner. Are you looking for it? Wow. Everyone's head up. Get your head up. Get your expectations up. Let's start looking for some great things. And everybody, if you haven't subscribed and done something, this is the first time you've heard Kyle, you need to be following Kyle, because this stuff, what he's putting out is gold every single day.
Thanks, brother. And the whispers, listen to the whispers, right? We discount those. You followed the whisper about there's a bigger dream. Could you? Yeah. And that took you down the sports route. Your dad didn't, poo-poo that, right? He actually encouraged it. And I think we all have the whispers if we're looking, right? If we're open.
100%.
And that's what part of what Two Chairs does as well. It puts you in that position to listen, right? Just to listen. And Bob, this has been amazing. I hope we do it again soon. And you're such an encourager, and you're doing so many amazing things. Again, I hope people go order the books. Now, here's the thing. Go order the books, period. And then send me an email saying I ordered the books, but put me in the drawing, and give us someone else you want us to send that book to. How about that, Bob?
Fantastic.
I like that one.
My favorite guy, June Jones, once said that he bought for his 12, he bought the Power Who, and he wrote it inside. He says, when I read this book, I thought about us. You're my who. I love you, JJ.
Well, Tom Ziegler gave me the before the book even came out, he gave me the publisher, wasn't quite finished, and he sent me an amazing note, made such an impression, and I'll thank him the rest of my life. And I am a big believer in giving away books. I've given away thousands of books, and people, they don't throw them away. They never forget it. And you might change someone's life. And so go buy the books, buy extras, and then send an email if you want to be put in a drawing. If there's anyone special you'd like us to send a signed copy of the book to, go follow Bob and go to bobbeaudine.com, find the books on Amazon or in the bookstores. And Bob, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, my friend.
It was always, this is just epic always to do something with you, and we will do it again.
Love it. Thanks, my friend.
Okay. Love you.
Love you.